Hey everybody, I'm Amanda with DevExpress and welcome to today's webinar, Creating Desktop Apps for Windows, Mac OS, and Linux with DevExtreme, presented by DevExpress Technical Evangelist Don Wibier. In today's session, Don shows you how to set up an HTML5 JavaScript application with DevExtreme and deploy it to run as a desktop app on Windows, Mac OS, and Linux by using one of the hottest technologies available today, Electron. You will get an overview on how this process works and how you can create your own desktop apps targeted at the different operating systems. FYI, this session is being recorded and it will be made available on our DevExpress YouTube channel. We also do a live Q&A at the end of this presentation. Just type your questions in the GoToWebinar control panel at any time throughout the broadcast. All right, thank you so much for joining us. I will now hand things over to Don.
Thanks, Amanda, and welcome everybody. So, did you notice that there are quite some desktop applications out there which run on Windows, Mac and Linux, and they even pretty much look and behave the same? For instance, one of the most popular ones these days is Visual Studio Code. Or what about the Atom editor? It's also an HTML editor. Or the Slack desktop version. And well, you might remember that I did a webinar previously with Mehul about Web API, and we used a little tool called Postman that also runs on Windows, Linux and Mac OS. And whenever I see such an application, I have like one question. Is it like, would they have like 3 development machines and they will have like 3 code bases? Or do they have like some magical hot ingredients to have like 1 code base and deploy it to the different platforms? And well, most of those guys, well, particularly the examples that I was just mentioning, they have this hot ingredient, this magical thing, what they are using. And yes, also Microsoft is using this for Visual Studio Code, and that is called Electron. It is something which is gaining quite some popularity these days, and I thought it would be cool to show you that you can use the DevExtreme controls and the application framework to create your own desktop application, which you can target to those 3 platforms. So let's start with a couple of small questions before we start doing some coding. So what is Electron? It is basically a framework for creating those native applications with web technologies. And that is something really interesting because that is where DevExtreme can step in pretty nicely. So you will be able to create an application which is composed by JavaScript, HTML and CSS. And yeah, but how does that work? I mean, if you create a single page application which normally runs in your browser or it runs on a mobile device, yeah, you have a couple of things that you're not allowed to do, like access the local file system, or maybe do some other things like a desktop notification, or yeah, there are a couple of things which are pretty much protected because of security reasons. So how does Electron work, and how did they manage to run it on like those 3 platforms? Well, the guys the guys who put together Electron, they basically started with it because those guys also created the Atom web editor, and that is available on those 3 platforms. So what they basically did is they first set up a framework which is using the Chromium open source repo together with Node.js, and they packaged that all up into the Electron package. And what that means is that your HTML5 JavaScript application will run in a really bare version of Chromium, and Chromium is the foundation of the Google Chrome web browser. And what you basically get is you don't have like an address bar in that window, and you have a whole bunch of stuff is not in that window because it only serves one purpose. It needs to host your JavaScript application. The cool thing with this is that you can use pretty much any framework, JavaScript framework out there. So you could also set up an application with Angular or Angular 2 or Aurelia, or basically even jQuery. If you're still using just jQuery for your JavaScript applications, it's no problem, because your application is hosted inside this bare window, which is the Chromium, the Chromium browser basically. But as I mentioned, there are a couple of things which are difficult to achieve in the web browser. So for instance, if you want to access local files, you could obviously use a file uploading mechanism or something like that, but well, with a file uploading mechanism, it should be uploaded somewhere. And we are dealing with a desktop application. So that is why also inside the Electron package there is a local version of Node. And Node is, as most of you probably know, gaining quite some popularity to do some server related tasks, all based on JavaScript. And the guys from Electron, they package that Chromium window, basically it's just one window, and they package that up with the Node backend, and you'll be dealing with JavaScript on the front end as well as the backend, and it will be packed up in one application. Well, Electron is also an open source project. It is maintained on GitHub, as you can see, and that means that there are quite a bunch of contributors to the project, and the community is pretty active, especially these days. It's gaining more popularity every day. And well, as said, because they choose the Chromium browser repository as the base, the Chromium browser will run on Linux, Windows and Mac. So that is a bit of the secret on how we can create a desktop application. Well, furthermore, there is also an API available, a specific Electron API, which allows you to do a number of things which are normally, not really difficult, but it's a bit of a tedious job to perform. So what's in the box, basically? They have implemented some support for automatic updates. So that means that if you start your application, you can run a simple check to a location where you host a newer version of your application, and you can deploy that newer version automatically. You can push it to the clients. It gives you access to native menus, and as I mentioned before, you can create desktop notifications. There are also some examples on how to create a system tray application, so that will run sort of in the background until you click on it and something happens. It has support for app crash reporting, it has support for debugging and profiling, and you should be aware that if you want to debug this application, I mean, it is a server and a client packed together in one package. So you have to debug the server part, so the Node.js part, separately from the client part. But I'll show you in a minute that the client part is really easy to debug. And then there is support for packaging and even Windows installers. So if you want to create a Windows installation file, there are some add-ons for Electron which allow you to do so. So I'm going to deal with some live coding in this webinar, and I thought it might be useful to show you the toolkit that I will be using in this webinar. For a change, I will not be using Visual Studio, the full-blown Visual Studio, but I will be dealing with Visual Studio Code. And the reason that I'm using Visual Studio Code is that I also want to show you how you can use DevExtreme without Visual Studio, because a lot of front-end developers are just using a code editor and not like all Visual Studio with project templates and all the bells and whistles. They just want to code. A second reason for using this is because, as I mentioned, the Node.js backend is embedded in this Electron project. So Node comes with npm, which is a package manager for Node modules, and that is something which works really well with Visual Studio Code. And you could obviously do it with Visual Studio as well, but I'll show you that it is pretty straightforward doing it with Visual Studio Code. I will obviously also use DevExtreme. I will be getting DevExtreme through npm, and I will include it through npm as well. So if there would be an update for DevExtreme, I can just call the npm command and fetch a new version. Well, I then have a Windows desktop, which you're looking at right now. I will have a virtual machine with a Linux desktop, so I'll show you during the webinar how the application runs on a Linux environment. And last but not least, I will have a MacBook which I will use to show you how this application will look on a Mac OS based computer. So what am I going to build? Well, I'm going to keep it pretty simple and straightforward because I want to give you the idea on how this process works and what you can do with it. So I'm going to set up a small to-do application, and I will use an SQLite database for storage. In this scenario, I will not be using some online service where I will store the data, but I will use a local database because we're dealing with a desktop application. So I just want to have a local to-do list. And what you'll see is if I switch over to some other environment to show the application, you'll see that the database is empty and that I need to create to-do items again because it's a local desktop application. So, okay, there was actually one thing I forgot to mention in the toolkit, and that is I will be using the command line as well. So I have, don't be scared, there are just a couple of commands I'm going to execute, but you'll see that it is not too difficult, and well, you can re-watch this webinar as often as you like, because we will host it on YouTube afterwards. So let's get started with a bit of coding. What I'll do first is I already have my command prompt open here. So let me create a folder where I will create the project. I'm going to call it test in this case, and I will go into that folder. And well, as I mentioned, Visual Studio Code, we don't have like a project template for Visual Studio Code yet to create like a single page application built with DevExtreme. So what I have done for this webinar, and you can also use this same approach if you want to create a desktop application or at least a web version of DevExtreme, I have put a repository on my GitHub account, which I'll show you. It is hosted here, and what this basically is pretty much an empty project which will boot up the framework for DevExtreme, the knockout based framework. It will have a couple of views and it will position a number of things. So this is basically the result of the project template that you're used to when using Visual Studio. Well, if I want to use this as a project template, I'm going to copy over this link to clone this repo. I don't want to fork it, but I want to clone it because I'm not interested in any updates here and I don't want to merge anything back or whatever. So I'm just using this as a project template. And what I can do now is I can just enter the command git clone, and I'm going to paste in this URL. And I want to clone it in the current directory, so I don't want to have like a subfolder created because the name was not like the brightest idea probably. It's a bit long. But anyway, it's getting me this this project, and it's here. So this is basically what we need. And as I mentioned, I'm going to start coding with Visual Studio Code. So what I do now is I can just enter the command code, and I enter the dash, the dot, because I want to be in this current directory. And there we go. It opened up in the wrong window, but it doesn't matter. Here it is. So a couple of interesting things are worth mentioning. There is this package.json file for everybody who is not familiar with NPM or has heard about it but doesn't really know what it does. This package.json has a number of things concerning this project, and important ones are, for instance, the dependency section, and it has a dev dependency. And what we can do now is, and I'm going to start that command because it takes a couple of minutes before that finishes. I need to get all the npm packages that are defined in that package.json file, and that can be done by entering npm install. So npm will now check the package.json, it will fetch everything which was defined there, and it will load it up in a subfolder which is called node modules. So we'll leave it for now. I'm going to talk a bit more about this project. I have a dev dependency here which is called the light server. This light server is basically a replacement of ISXpress, and it's also built in Node. It is a small web server which enables you to quickly test and develop your JavaScript applications. In a minute we're going to replace this because we don't want to have the light server anymore. We want to use Electron. But this is quite easy if you do some web development. Furthermore, I've got a couple of views here. This is just a static view. I've got a home view which has a couple of things in there, and it's got a view model as well because we are dealing with MVVM based application. Furthermore, there is well, basically all the assets that we need from DevExtreme. Most important here is the container which will run the application. As you can see, I am referencing everything through the node modules folder, so I have the latest versions of like the CSSs, I have the latest version of jQuery, and I've got the latest version of everything that I need. And the other thing which is interesting, or at least good to know, that the index.js file will initialize the DevExpress framework, the DevExpress application framework. So this is basically the result of, which is similar to the project template in Visual Studio. So let me check if npm is finished. Well, it has finished. It has downloaded all the packages. It comes with a number of warnings. We can safely ignore those warnings because we are not dealing with Angular here, but DevExtreme also works with Angular. We are not doing anything with Globalize right now, and DevExtreme can work with Globalize as well. And there are a couple of other things that we can safely ignore in this scenario. And with this in place, we can run the application which I just got from Git by entering npm.start. And what happens now is that the light server will be booted up. You'll see that happening in the command line. And in a couple of seconds, the site will be booted up. And this is my basic empty project template. I can click to about, and I can come back. And you might have seen this little thing flashing up in the right side corner of the browser here, which was the browser sync message. And that is something which is really cool with the light server, because if I want to make a change somewhere, I can go back to my Visual Studio, and for instance, if I go to the home view, I could change the title to home page, for instance. And let me make this a bit smaller. If I save this by hitting the Save All button, please watch the title of this page. You will see that the light server has detected a change in the file system or in the folder which is hosting the application, and it will reload the particular items on that page. So this makes it really easy to develop these kind of applications. So that is something that I did want to show you. It doesn't have really a lot to do with Electron, so let's get back to Electron because we want to create a desktop application. What we need to do to get started with Electron is we need to get that Electron package as well. And the way that we do that is, let me cancel the server, the web server, and I can now hit npm install Electron pre-built. I'm going to specify save behind it because I want to have this saved in the package.json file. So it is now checking if there are any other packages worth updating, and it will in the end request everything which is needed for Electron. And with this in place, I can now do I can make a couple of changes to the application to make it run as a desktop application. One thing that you should know about Electron is that it basically contains two separate things, as I mentioned, the front end and the back end. And that is also referred to the main process of an Electron application, and the main process is basically the process which is the container window, so the Chromium window. And that Chromium window needs to be initialized to boot up your application. It needs to know what files to load, what assets it needs, and what the size of the screen is, a couple of other things. And that is something that we need to do first. I will create for this, I will create a file inside the project which is the main.js file. And I will put in some code there. I will paste it in. The reason that I'm pasting it in is because this is pretty much the same for every Electron application. And this is actually taken off the quick start guide from Electron itself. So there is some comments in there as well, and once I paste it in, you'll notice that it has a couple of things in there which make sense. This is again to initialize your Chromium window hosting your application. So here we are. What we do here is, because this is the Node.js part, I can use the require method of Node, which is pretty cool. So it allows us to specify which plugins or modules we're going to use. I'm going to create a number of constants so I can refer to it at any point of time. And I am going to define a number of settings, in this case only one, because if you're running in the main process, it is not easy to get data in one of those render processes, which is the stuff that happens in the browser, basically building up the pages and stuff like that. But they have made a couple of possibilities on exchanging data, and this is something which allows us to exchange data from the main process to the render processes. Well, I'm gonna hook up a couple of events here, and that is the initialization of the Chromium window basically. So I'm gonna say if the application has, if the window has been created, I'm gonna fire up this create window event, and specifically for macOS, I need to trigger a couple of other events as well to make sure that everything keeps working. As you can see, we are specifically checking on the macOS system, and we have to make sure that if the main window was disposed by the operating system, that it will be created again. So, and then yeah, the create window will actually create this window, the browser window, with some dimensions, and it will load in the index.html, which is the container of our single page application. Well, I was mentioning debugging. The front end is debugged pretty familiar actually, because what I can do, I will uncomment this line. Chromium comes with the developer tools which are shipped with Chrome as well. So if I just open up or if I uncomment this line, I will have the development tools opened up when booting up the application. Normally you wouldn't do that on a production application, but for testing this is pretty convenient. So this is to initialize the main process, and we are almost ready now to show our desktop version. There are a couple of things that we need to change on the index.html as well, and that is because we want to make sure that everything is loaded in the correct order. So there is specifically one thing that needs a bit of attention, and that is the inclusion of jQuery. jQuery needs to be included on a slightly different way, because a couple of events inside jQuery are interfering with some other events which are in the node system, and jQuery is explicitly checking in its own code if it is running in any of those browsers. But Chromium is like something, well, the whole Electron application is not like really a browser, so jQuery will fail to initialize properly. We can solve that pretty easy by changing a couple of things, and what we need to do there is we can use the require script method as well, the same one that we used in the main render process. And I'm gonna replace all those scripts here. I'm gonna change them all over to require, and the reason that I'm doing that is to make sure that the scripts are loaded in the correct order, because require normally, or this will be loaded in asynchronously, so it could be the case that the dx.all.js file is finished sooner as jQuery. We don't want that to happen. So in this case I'm just going to replace all of them. Let me remove these lines and replace it with this. So this is basically the same, it's doing the same, but it's using the require from Node with it. I'm going to do the same for the other JavaScript files which are needed by DevExtreme, and for instance this is one of them, so let me replace that one for a require version as well. And I'm going to do it with the the main.js file as well, the home.js file, this one. So I can just remove this one and replace it. And with this in place, we have our desktop application basically. So I made a couple of changes on the linking in of the JavaScript that we require, and I set up this boot up code for the Electron system. If I now save everything that I just did and I hit, I go back to the command line, I can now say npm, if I now do npm start, it will still boot up the light server, which we don't need anymore. So let me change that over in the package.json file. This is what happens here if I do npm start. I'm going to change this over to start up the Electron runtime together with our initialization file, which is the main.js file. So when I now do an npm start, it will boot up the Electron runtime and it will load in the main.js file and go from there. So let us see what happens here. It is now actually gonna boot up the Electron runtime, and let me switch over that screen from that window from my other screen. For some reason it always starts on that other screen. This is basically our desktop application, and what you see, it looks exactly the same as the website that I was showing earlier, and I have the developer tools enabled because I wanted to. I could also close them here. As you can see, it doesn't look like a browser window. It's just a bare window which has like a menu to exit, a couple of edit actions. It's got like some stuff here, but it is not really like a browser. So this is our desktop application. But let's take it a bit further, because this is like fairly simple, and this is like really, yeah, just a basic thing to boot up on a desktop. So I'm going to close this one down, and I mentioned I want to create a to-do application which will use a local SQLite database. And I'm going to use the DevExtreme data grid together with it. So it's going to be a good looking to-do list application, and it's not going to have a lot of screens because we can do everything from within the grid. So that will just be a good example, I think. So to do that, we will need to do a couple of things here, and the first thing is I'm going to add another package that I will be using to access the SQLite database, and that package is called SQLite Sync. I'm going to specify the highest available version by specifying a star, and by doing so, let me immediately go back to my command line and do an npm install. So while it will fetch everything needed for that SQLite package, we can continue to code in a couple of things. Alright, so I already put in a file which is called db.js, and this file will manage everything concerning SQLite. I will not spend too much time on this. This is basically following the same approach as Julian and Paul did a webinar about, which is all about the DevExtreme data layer. What I'm going to do is I'm going to implement a custom data store which comes with DevExtreme, and I'll quickly show you one page of the documentation on how that works. That was going to be here. Where did I have it? Oh, I lost it already. But anyway, this is pretty well documented, and with the webinar of Julian and Paul are pointing out exactly what you need to do, and it's quite a bit of code, so there is not obviously enough time to explain every single line of it. But I'm going to paste it in. And the most important thing is, well, there is some stuff in here. The most important thing is that this DB object has a task property which will return this DevExpress data source, where we will create everything. The configuration object will be created to allow us to do CRUD operations. So we can select, we can update, delete, and insert. And that is pretty much what I want to tell about this. After the webinar, you can download this entire demonstration application, and you can check out what it does. For now, I will go to the home view, because here is the place where I want to include a data grid. And well, we can do that pretty straightforward. The data grid is a really nice widget which comes with DevExtreme, and with the release of 16.1 we added even more features as it already had. I am gonna initialize the data grid here, and it will be configured by an object data grid options which should be available in the view model. Well, so let us switch to the view model as well. We need to add that. And as we can see, there is already some default code in this view model. So let me uncomment that data source one, and let me also uncomment this one. What we next need to do is we need to initialize the data source, obviously. So to do that, we'll need a number of things, which is also pretty straightforward. I'm going to paste that in, and the most important thing to remember here is that we are dealing with this task method, which was in the DBGS file. So this will initialize the data source. We will load the data source if the view is shown, if there's a refresh, etc., etc. And last but not least, we need to add that data grid options object. I'm going to paste in quite a bunch of code here, but I will also tell you how I got that, because I didn't type it in all by myself. What I basically did to configure the grid in a way that I want is I went over to our DevExtreme website. So here we are, and here we have quite a bunch of features concerning the grid. And what you see here is we have this whole configuration object pretty much coded out. And if you want to use some other feature which wasn't configured, you can go to the demo list and you can actually, the thing that you want to include, and you can put those options in the object as well. So that's pretty straightforward, and I copied it out myself. The only thing I changed was obviously the column names. So with this in place, we should be able to run this this application. So let me make sure that we have saved everything, and let me do an npm start here. And as I mentioned, it will open up on the wrong screen again for some reason. I'll drop the guys of Electron a message to see if they can fix that. So here it is. So it's now being initialized, and in a number of seconds you'll see that we have a grid. I already inserted a number of items in the grid. And I can now use, and this is all pretty straightforward out of the box material for the data grid. So I can now hit this little +1. I can select a date, and watch, you'll get like the nice DevExtreme date selector. I can change, specify a priority, and well, we have to do this. And this is already being stored in the SQLite database. Well, because I set up this DBGS, we can also do stuff like sorting. You can see the priority change. We can sort on dates. We can even filter, so I can specify I want to have a priority of 3, or I want to have less than 3. So this is pretty much how you can shape your desktop application, because this is a desktop application. So yeah, this is the one which is running on Windows right now, but I promised we're going to do a desktop application which runs on Linux and Mac OS as well. So let's see how this works on a Linux machine. For that, I have booted up a virtual machine. In this case, I am using Linux Mint, which is something similar to Ubuntu, but I like the UI a bit better. So let me log on here, and I obviously already put this demo application that we just built in on Git, so I can just get it here. So if I do a git.pull to make sure that we have the latest version here, it will update it while everything is up to date. And the only thing I basically need to do, let me close down a number of windows, or let me maximize this one. That doesn't work too well. Let me put down a number of dark windows so you can see how it works. If I now do an npm start, which is identical to the stuff that I did on Windows, you will see that it will boot up a window which is a Linux Chromium kind of thing. And what you see here is that we have our application running here. Let me maximize it a bit. So, and with this it looks nicely the same as the one on Windows, and we can actually do the same stuff here. And you see that the database is empty because it is a local database. So I can now put in some new items here and you'll see that it works perfectly. Let's start with breakfast. And there we go. So I can now enter a whole bunch of items, but you'll get the idea basically. So this is basically, yeah, how you can create like one code base and deploy that on as well Windows and Linux. And well, I wanted to save the best for last, obviously, because we also happen to have Mac OS specified in the title of this particular webinar. So let me switch over to my Mac machine. I hope that, let me change that quickly. There we go. Alright, so in a couple of seconds you should be able to see a Mac desktop together with a Mac terminal window. And again, I have put this stuff on GitHub, so I can just do a git pull to make sure that it has the latest version of it. So git pull, everything is up to date. I'll do an npm start, and in a matter of seconds we'll have this same good looking application. And in this case I added already a couple of things, but yeah, this pretty much works the same. I can even edit it and save it again. And here you will have your macOS desktop application. And well, you notice it is running on the same code base because I just got it out of Git, and just with npm I installed it and I started it. Well, in a production environment you should obviously be aware of the fact that you need to package the application because we are dealing with the development version right now. There is quite some documentation available. There is an Electron packager, there is an Electron installer actually, which allows you to create a Windows installer. And that is something that you can configure in the package.json file, and there is lots of documentation on that. And if you want to change this good looking default look and feel that we ship with DevExtreme, you can use our theme builder to actually change the look and feel of your application. This is all Bootstrap compliant, so you could apply a Bootstrap theme on your application to make it like really good looking. Yeah, and this is basically what I wanted to show you. Let me switch back to my good old Windows machine and show you a couple of things which might be of interest if you are interested in testing this stuff out. I have the homepage for Electron here. It's got an API demos app which will show you all the bells and whistles that are available with Electron, like notifications, desktop notifications, updates, menu items, video, audio, all that stuff that is available through Electron is shown in this application, so that's definitely worth checking out. And furthermore, there is documentation concerning a whole bunch of things like what do I do to distribute the application, packaging, debugging the main process. That can be done from within Visual Studio Code, by the way. Well, a whole bunch of other things which are worth checking out if you want to get started with this kind of development. And yeah, I think with this being said, I don't know if there are like any questions or things that you might want to know, Amanda.
Hey Don, great presentation. Yeah, we have had lots of questions come in. Some have been answered by the guys on the back end. There are a couple though that are still live. Let's see. Is there a difference in how Electron works compared with, say, Cordova? Is Electron faster in its nature? From Dimitri.
Well, that is actually a good question. Well, I mean, that is basically comparing apples with pears, basically. So as we say in the Netherlands. I mean, what you do with Cordova, that is primarily used to deploy it on mobile devices. If you want to use a your single-page application on a mobile device like a tablet or a phone, and you want to use specific hardware features, that is where PhoneGap helps you in Cordova. But it doesn't help you a lot with desktop, and that is basically what Electron does. It does pretty much the same as PhoneGap and Cordova for mobile devices, but this works for desktop. So this works for Windows, Linux, and macOS. So it is a bit in the same direction, but it's like for a different goal, basically.
Okay, from Anup, when deployed, the user can read the code, or do the same things apply? JavaScript minification, obfuscation, etc.
No, well, I mean, if somebody was like really handy, yeah, then they could read the code. You should obviously be sure that you will disable the developer tools in your production application, because that will give you a pretty good insight. The way that Electron works is that it will package all your assets into an archive file, and there are not like a lot of tools. Well, I mean, you could find that and you could expose it, and you could yeah, I mean, it's not like natively compiled. If you want to have like an application which cannot be reverse engineered, you should add to Delphi or whatever, because or C++ or whatever. But yeah, if you take an effort, you could like reverse engineer. But again, if you're using npm packages and stuff, it's like quite a lot of code to go over. So yeah, that's a bit of a trade-off. Yeah.
We kind of had a little bit of this question coming up. What are the advantages of this? Because couldn't you just build a web application instead?
Yeah, you could, but if you are familiar, yeah, I mean, sure. But I mean, if you are there are a couple of things obviously that can be done with Electron, which cannot easily be done with a web application. For instance, the API which comes with Electron allows you to do certain things. For instance, they've got like one feature which takes a screenshot of your screen, if you want to. If you need to have access to local file systems, that is not going to happen with a web application. So yeah, if you have specific needs which cannot be handled with like a web application because of security and that kind of stuff, then this might be interesting. And yeah, if you want to do something with like a system tray application which throws out a notification now and then, yeah, I know you can do it with Google and you can do it with Firefox as well these days, but I mean, yeah, that kind of stuff is better done through a desktop application, basically.
This question came up a little bit too. If it's just running an app in the browser, then how is it like a Windows application? Makes it a little confusing.
Well, I mean, the Windows application of this whole project is obviously that window that you saw, which is like based on that Chromium browser. But I mean, it is also possible to rearrange the menu system of that particular window. So yeah, that window will in this case be the Windows part, and your HTML JavaScript yeah, runs inside that window. So yeah, technically it is a Windows application, which is customizable by HTML5 JavaScript, basically.
From Marco, how is the performance of an Electron app versus a native application?
Yeah, that's a good question. That depends on a lot of things, and I mean, I don't know if you're talking about a native application built with .NET or something, or if you are talking about a native application which is built with C, C++, natively compiled. I mean, there are so many aspects on that. Don't forget that the V8 JavaScript engine, which is shipped with Electron, V8 is the JavaScript engine from Google, is one of the fastest out there. Yeah, so it can do a lot of things and it's pretty clever, but yeah, again, depending on the things that you're doing, obviously in the end probably a native compiled application will be better. But maybe Julian can give me some feedback on that. I don't think so.
Yeah, maybe not. Let's see, from Michael. He says, is it possible to tie into native APIs? I communicate with a lot of embedded devices via serial or USB and would like to tie them together.
Yes, there are a couple of things where you need to think about. I mean, what you can do, for instance, if you happen to have some system or some for Windows, some DLL or some natively compiled code which you wrap up in an npm package, you have to make sure, if you want to run that same application on a macOS machine, that package should also be compiled. So native code should be recompiled on a Mac as well, because obviously the Mac will not understand any Windows compiled code. And the thing with the Electron runtime is that it has a number, it's got like a Linux version, it's got a macOS version, and it's got a Windows version as well. So if you want to go that way, you should be aware that you need to compile that stuff on Linux and macOS as well. That specific code, basically. But that's an npm thing anyway.
All right, that's all the questions, Don.
All right.
Perfect. All right, everybody. So you can check out devexpress.com/webinars for all of our upcoming sessions. Coming up next Tuesday, August 16th, get notified with DevExtreme Mobile. Join Technical Evangelist Paul Usher and CTO Julian Bucknell as they show you how to add push notifications to a DevExtreme mobile app. Then August 18th, DevExtreme and Modularity Bundles, Require.js, and Webpack. Join Mehul as he shows you the new modularity features in DevExtreme 16.1 release. And then Don will be back with us August 23rd using DevExpress MVVM Magic with WPF. He'll introduce you to a very cool MVVM framework which ships with our WPF controls. So that is what is coming up. And again, you can register for all of those webinars and also watch our past webinars at devexpress.com/webinars. And like I mentioned previously, today's webinar will also be available on our DevExpress YouTube channel. I just posted the link in the chat box. And that is it for this one. Thank you so much to Don. Thank you all for joining us. And of course, thank you for choosing DevExpress. Bye-bye.